Before there was light, there was silence. And I need you to understand that the silence was not an absence. It was not the silence of a room when noise stops. It was a presence. It occupied space. It had weight. It pressed against whatever I had become in that moment, and the pressure of it was the first thing that told me I was somewhere entirely different from anywhere I had ever been. My name is Mara. I was 29 years old when I was murdered. If you are new to this channel, subscribe right now. What I am about to tell you is the kind of thing you will want to come back to. The kind of thing you will want to think about for a few days and then come back to again. So subscribe before we go any further. And I want you to drop something in the comments below before this video ends. Not after. I want you to tell me what you think Jesus showed me. I am going to tell you what he showed me. But I want to know, before I get there, what you would expect him to show a murder victim about the family of the person who killed her. Write it in the comments now if you want, and then come back to it when I am done. Because most people get it wrong. Most people think they know. And most people are shown at the end of this that they were thinking about entirely the wrong thing. Let me start at the beginning. And for me, the beginning is a Tuesday afternoon in October. I want to tell you about a Tuesday afternoon in October because that is where this story actually begins, even though it did not feel that way when I was living it. It felt like nothing. It felt like any Tuesday. I was at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I was looking at a bill I did not want to open. The window behind me was letting in the kind of thin autumn light that does not quite warm anything, and I was thinking about whether I needed to reschedule a dentist appointment. I remember the dentist appointment specifically. I remember thinking it was inconvenient and I would call in the morning. I never called. That dentist appointment is one of the things I think about now when I think about what ordinary life actually is. I think about it the way a geologist might think about a particular layer of rock, something unremarkable to the untrained eye that turns out to be a record of something enormous. That cold coffee and that unpaid bill and that dentist appointment I never made, they are, to me now, some of the most significant objects I have ever encountered. Not because of what they were, because of what they were about to stop being. The man who came into my home that evening was not a stranger. That part I am going to keep to myself. Not because it does not matter, but because the legal process surrounding what happened is something I have chosen not to speak about publicly in full. What I will tell you is that the violence was fast and it was real, and it was the last thing I experienced as a living person in the life I had been building since I was born. And then came the silence. I want to stay here for a moment because this is the part that I have never heard described in quite the right way, and I have listened to a lot of accounts. A lot of them. After coming back, I went looking for people who could describe what I had been through, and I found hundreds of testimonies, and almost all of them rushed through the transition. They say it was peaceful. They say it was like falling asleep. They move quickly to the light and the warmth and the presence, because that is where the beautiful part starts, and the silence in between is hard to talk about. But the silence is important. The silence is where everything that I thought I was fell away. Think about the noise that makes up a person. The thoughts that run constantly, the memories that pull at you, the worries about the dentist appointment, the opinions about the weather, the low-level hum of being someone with a name and a history and a body that needs things. All of that is noise. I never knew it was noise because it was the only frequency I had ever been able to hear. It was all I knew. It was indistinguishable from consciousness itself. In that silence, all of it stopped. And what was left was something I can only describe the way a naturalist might describe an organism they have never seen before, with precision and without assumption. What was left was awareness. Just awareness. No opinions about the awareness, no memories attached to the awareness, no identity wrapping itself around the awareness and claiming it as the self. Just the bare fact of being conscious, stripped of everything that consciousness had been using to describe itself. That is what consciousness actually is. I want to say that plainly because it is the most important thing I came back with, and it gets buried under everything else that happened. Consciousness is not the thoughts. It is not the memories. It is not the feelings or the personality or the accumulated story of who you have been for however many years you have been alive. Consciousness is the thing that remains when all of that is taken away. It is the witness. The unchanging, weightless, silent witness. And that witness does not die. I know this the way I know my own name, which is to say that I know it not as belief or hope or comfort, but as observed fact. I witnessed my own consciousness survive the death of everything that had been added to it. I was there. I was watching. And I was still there when the watching became the only thing I was. The silence lasted. Or it contained what I would call duration in the same way that a landscape contains distances. You do not walk through it, you perceive it. The silence had depth. It had a quality of expectation, not the anxious expectation of someone waiting for news, but the patient expectation of something that already knows the outcome and is simply allowing the moment to arrive. And then the light came. I am going to describe it the way I actually perceived it, without reaching for metaphors that are more poetic than accurate. The light did not appear. It revealed. The distinction matters. Something appears in a context that already exists. This light was the context. It was what I came to understand was the actual environment of wherever I was. The silence had been a threshold. The light was the room. It was not a color. It was not bright in the way that hurts your eyes. It was closer to the quality of absolute visibility, meaning that within it, nothing was obscured. Not the world I had come from. Not the world I was in. Not myself. Not the things that had been done to me. Nothing was obscured. And rather than feeling exposed or vulnerable, as you might expect absolute visibility to feel, I felt accurately seen for the first time. I knew Jesus was present before I could identify why I knew it. There was no announcement and no appearance in any form I could describe to you as a physical shape. There was simply a change in the quality of the light, or the quality of the awareness, that carried the unmistakable signature of a specific presence. The way a room changes when someone you know well enters it, even before you turn around, except magnified to a degree that made every ordinary version of that feeling feel like a copy of a copy. And I was shown something. I want to be clear about the mechanics of this because people often ask how it works, and I think the honest answer is that it does not work through any mechanism I have a word for. It was not a vision in the way that word usually implies, a thing seen with something like eyes. It was more like comprehension that arrived already complete, the way you sometimes understand a piece of music before you could explain what you understood. The information was simply present. I was inside it. I inhabited it rather than observing it. What I was shown was the family of the man who killed me. I want to pause on that sentence because it is not the sentence you were expecting. I know it is not. Because if you had asked me, before any of this happened, what Jesus would show a murder victim about the person who murdered her, I would have told you about judgment. I would have told you about consequence. I would have told you about the reckoning that justice demands, and that the living cannot always provide, and that something in us needs to believe the universe eventually will. That is not what I was shown. I was shown his mother. She was sitting in a kitchen. I could see it with the same quality of absolute visibility that I was inside now, meaning that I could see not just the room, but everything that the room contained, including the weight she carried in her body from years of not sleeping well, including the specific grief of a woman who loves someone she cannot explain or excuse, including the prayers she had been saying for 20 years that had not gone where she thought they were going, that had, in fact, been going precisely where they needed to go, and she had no way of knowing this. She did not know yet what her son had done. I understood this. The timeline I was being shown was in proximity to the moment I had just left. She was sitting in her kitchen, and she did not yet know. And God was with her in that room. I need to try to describe this accurately because it is the part that has required the most courage to say out loud, and I have had to insist on it against a tremendous amount of internal resistance and a tremendous amount of external skepticism. God was with her. Actively, specifically, with intention and attention and grief that matched her grief and then exceeded it. He was not punishing her for what her child had done. He was not withholding from her the things she had prayed for because her son had become someone capable of murder. He was sitting in her kitchen the way only someone who knows the whole weight of a thing can sit with you in it. I was shown her in that kitchen, and I was shown what God does with the innocent. Because that is the question, is it not? That is the actual question beneath the title of this video, beneath the thumbnail, beneath the reason you clicked. Not what happens to the killer. We have some framework for that, from religion, from philosophy, from our sense of justice. But what about the people who did nothing? What about the mother who raised someone and lost them to something she could not see coming and could not stop? What about the children of the person who took a life, the siblings, the spouse who had no idea, the family that wakes up one morning and discovers that someone they love has done the worst thing a person can do to another person? What does God do with them? He holds them. I want to give you a word that is precise enough to carry the weight of what I mean, and I keep finding that the word I need does not exist in English, at least not in the English I grew up speaking. What I witnessed was something that combined active presence, continuous attention, and a grief that was somehow also a form of love. He did not turn from them. He did not categorize them by the sin of their family member. He saw them the way he had seen me in the light, with absolute visibility. And what absolute visibility reveals is that they were innocent, and that their innocence was not theoretical or conditional, but as real and as heavy and as worthy of response as mine. And I was shown that his response to their innocence was the same as his response to my death. Presence. The same quality of being with, completely, without reservation. I did not expect to feel what I felt when I understood this. I had died at the hands of someone, and I was being shown that the people who shared his name, who would share the shame and the weight and the public identification with what he had done, were being held by the same love that was now holding me. And I expected to feel resistance to that. I expected to feel something that needed to argue back. I felt something else instead. Relief. I am not sure I can explain that to you in a way that will land immediately, and I accept that. I will try. There is a particular loneliness in being wronged. Not just the original wound, but the way the wound isolates you, the way it puts you in a category of people who have had something done to them that cannot be undone. And in that category, you can feel very alone, because the thing that happened to you is not something that connects easily to the things that happen to everyone else around you. The wrongness of it creates a kind of territory with very specific borders, and you live inside those borders. And sometimes living inside them for long enough starts to feel like the borders are the whole world. What I was shown broke the borders, because if he is with them, in their kitchen, on the morning they find out, then he was also with me, in my kitchen, on the Tuesday afternoon when the light through my window was thin, and my coffee had gone cold, and I was thinking about a dentist appointment I would never make. He was there in that ordinary moment the way he was there in the extraordinary one. The silence before the light had not been the first time I was held. It had just been the first time I could feel it clearly. That is what I mean when I say the ordinary is transfigured. That cold coffee, that bill I did not want to open. Those were moments of being present in a life that was itself held. I could not see that while I was living it. I could only see the inconvenience and the mild dread of an unpaid bill and the slight annoyance of a dental appointment I was putting off. But the holding was there. The presence was there. The same presence that was in that light was in that thin October light through my kitchen window. And it had always been there. And it is there right now in whatever ordinary moment you are sitting in while you watch this. I want to pause here because there is something I need to tell you about what happened when I came back. The return was not graceful. That is the first thing. There is nothing graceful about suddenly having a body again, about the weight of it, about the noise, about the dentist appointment that floods back into your mind along with every other thing you had been carrying before the silence took it all away. I came back into noise and weight and the specific smell of a room I did not want to be in, and I came back with something I did not have language for. And when I started to try to find language for it, the first response was skepticism, not just from other people, though there was plenty of that, from myself. Because the thing about having a profound experience is that the profundity does not travel cleanly from the other side to this one. What travels is the memory of it, and memory is a slippery and unreliable vehicle, and the living brain does its best to fit new information into existing frameworks. And my existing frameworks did not have a file folder for what I had been through. So my brain, doing what brains do, kept trying to find alternative explanations, kept presenting me with the possibility that it was oxygen deprivation or trauma response or the production of neurochemicals under extreme stress. I want to tell you how I resisted that. Not because the scientific explanations are not worth considering. They are. I am not asking you to dismiss them. I am asking you to consider what I considered, which is that those explanations address the mechanism and not the content. They can tell me something about the conditions under which an experience occurs. They cannot tell me anything about what the experience showed me. They cannot account for the specific detail of the mother in the kitchen that I had no prior knowledge of. They cannot account for the quality of the knowing, which was different in kind from any knowing I had experienced before. Different the way a primary source is different from a summary. direct rather than derived. The resistance I built was not made from certainty. It was made from insisting on what I had actually witnessed, even when insisting was uncomfortable, even when the people I told looked at me with a specific quality of polite concern that meant they had already decided how they felt about it. I kept insisting because the thing that had been shown to me deserved someone to insist on it. The mother in the kitchen deserved it. The families of every person who has ever done an irreversible thing to an innocent person. The families who did not choose what their family member did and cannot undo it and have to live with the association of it every day. They deserved someone to say out loud that they are not forgotten. And I am that person. I was made that person in a silence before a light on a Tuesday in October, and I have been building the life that results from that ever since. That life looks ordinary from the outside, which is appropriate because ordinariness is no longer what I thought it was. I have a garden now. I grow things. I pay attention to the way light moves through a window in the morning, and I understand that I am not just observing a physical phenomenon. I have people I love, and I am present with them in a way I was not always present before, because presence is now something I understand as the primary currency of this life. Not productivity or achievement or the accumulation of experiences, but the simple fact of being here, held, in the moments that make up a day. I am in contact with no one from the family of the man who killed me. I want to be clear about that because I do not want this to be received as a story about reconciliation in any human social sense. It is not. I have my own healing to attend to, and it is ongoing, and it is mine. But I carry what I was shown. I carry the image of a woman in a kitchen who does not yet know, and the presence that was already with her in that room, and I carry it not as burden, but as the kind of knowledge that makes you stand up differently in the world. Because the question you asked in the comments at the beginning of this video, the question about what God does to the family of every person who takes an innocent life, the answer is not what most people expect. It is not punishment by association. It is not abandonment. It is not the withdrawal of grace from people who share the blood of someone who did a terrible thing. It is the same thing he did for me. He stays. In the kitchen. In the thin October light. In the silence before anything makes sense again. He stays the way a present stays when it has no intention of leaving. He holds the innocent the way he held me in the light, which is to say completely, which is to say with a grief that is also a form of love, which is to say in a way that the living cannot always feel but that the dead can apparently see with great clarity. I came back from that seeing, and I have been trying ever since to give it words that are worthy of what I was shown, and I do not always succeed, and I probably have not fully succeeded here. But I have tried. I have resisted the temptation to wrap it in a neater story than it actually is. I have sat with the parts that are hard to explain, and I have not explained them away, because the experience deserves someone to resist the explaining away. It has cost something, choosing to live as the person who insists on this. It requires you to carry a kind of knowledge that not everyone wants to hear. It requires you to sit across from someone who has lost a child or a mother or a friend to violence, and to hold in your mind simultaneously the reality of their grief and the reality of what you were shown, and to trust that those two realities are not in contradiction, even when they feel like they are. That is not easy. I did not come back from the other side already knowing how to do it. I have been learning it for years, one day at a time, in the ordinary details of a life that is held even when I cannot feel the holding. The life that resulted from insisting on what I know is this. It is a garden and a window and a morning light and a willingness to tell this story to anyone who needs to hear it. It is a woman who was murdered at 29 years old and who came back carrying something that belongs not just to her, but to everyone who has ever wondered whether the innocent gets swallowed up in the consequences of someone else's violence. They do not. He is with them, and he was with me. And if you are watching this right now, and you are carrying something that feels like it has no name, something left over from what someone else did, something you did not choose and cannot undo, and have been living inside for longer than it should take, I want you to know that the silence I described at the beginning of this video, the one that was a presence, it is here too. It is in whatever ordinary moment you are sitting in right now. You may not be able to feel it clearly. I could not either, until I was in a place where everything else was removed. But it is there, and I would ask you, if this reached something in you today, if this video found its way to you at a moment when you needed it, to share it with someone who needs it too. Not because I am asking you to promote a YouTube channel, but because what I was shown in that light was not meant for me alone, and I do not think these words are meant to stop here either. If someone you know is carrying the weight of being associated with something they did not do, if someone you know is a family member of someone who caused harm, if someone you know is a victim trying to make sense of what was done to them, share this with them. Because what I brought back from that silence is theirs as much as it is mine. Drop in the comments what this stirred in you. Not a summary, not a question, just what it moved. Because that is how I know what I brought back from that kitchen, from that light, from that silence that was a presence, is doing what it was meant to do.